only, in simple terms, knowledge has layers and levels. And what you offer for free is not necessarily the same level that you should offer for money. And what is for awareness is not necessarily what's for being, like helping people develop a profession. Again, I wrote a Facebook status a while ago about, the levels of science, for example, in the West. There's science, popular science, and pseudoscience. We live here in the Middle East. You probably guys, working your way through understanding these. They're all mixed up. Academia is one thing. People who communicate science to the mass public are different. And those people who act like they're scientists, but they're not. They're third level. Learners themselves. Even the types of university degrees. You have a community college and you have a university. You have an associate degree and you have a bachelor degree. You have an undergraduate diploma and a graduate diploma and an undergraduate certificate and a postgraduate certificate and a PhD and masters and joint masters and majors and minors and all these distinct credentials. And the more distinct credentials you have and the more variety, the more you'll be able to work out the financing of these things. But if you always develop and just work things in only one block, you cannot offer people different opportunities. You must work yourself through offering different opportunities for people. Not just free or for money, cheap or expensive, but what is that entailing? This is something that we as a society we have to address. We as individuals, we have to conceptualize and think about. I'm sorry it took so long for this, but for the NGOs that are following, perhaps think about it. All right. The last point I want to mention, that education is very much connected to your lifestyle. The way you perceive education will eventually be reflected in your lifestyle. Because the way you perceive education will entail certain choices, economic choices and social choices. I'm not saying you have to do compromises, but you have to put that in context. Don't think that you live in isolated islands. Everything in life is complex. There are different factors that are dynamic, they're not static, and the interplay between them also affects the sum in the end, the outcome. On page 53, he talks about how to, at the end of page 53, it says, it is further necessary to repeat the lesson of yesterday 5 times, the lesson of the preceding day 4 times, and the lesson of the day previous to that 3 times, and the one which comes before 2 times, and that of the day before that 1 time. Alright, so it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They would total into 15 repetitions. 5 plus 4 equals 9. It's okay. Alright, 5 plus 4 equals 9, and then plus 3 equals 12, another 3 equals 15. And this idea of spacing the repetition, see what he's saying, he's not saying repeat everything, equal amount. What? Well, alright, if you can take care of that, thank you. Alright. He's not saying repeat everything on the same day. Don't cram. All right. Well, all right. Let's just wait for the cockroach to be taken care of. That was a good diffuse mode for the learning how to learn forwards. This is the ecology of learning. You must be environmentally aware of things. This is our green learning. Yes. Okay, so he mentioned that you have 15 slots. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 equals up to 15. What he's proposing, this is not necessarily the only right way to do it. But what he's saying, space out your repetition. Don't repeat one thing on one day and then you leave it, but you come back to it in also in a gradual way. And this is something that was promoted by a professor called Robert Bjork and others who did the research. He's from the University of UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. and he talked about the importance of spaced repetition. See, when we cram for, when we do an all-nighter, we do a cramming for a test on the second day, what happens is that knowledge is facilitated, but for the short term. You might use it just for the exam that you have the next day, but you can't remember it afterwards. And this is also another reason why people look down on memorization. Why? Because I memorized before the exam, but I can't remember things next year. Well, because you're memorizing in the wrong way. Spaced repetition is what facilitates long-term retention. Alright? The more you space out your repetitions, your deliberate practices, the longer you will sustain this information in your memory. And he actually explicitly said that on page 54. After he explained this, he said, "For this method is the most stimulating for holding subject matter in the memory." That's 800 years ago, before Robert Bjork and others. Again, we can talk about how this can be done in modern times. That's another issue. But the point is that they had the same concern. Which is the best way to repeat things in a manner or in a fashion that sustains long-term retention? And what they proposed is some kind of a spaced repetition. Alright? So spaced repetition is extremely valuable. And you will find that things that you remember now and that are always present in your memory, and you're able to retain them, they're usually things that you have repeated for so long and over a long period of time, and you periodically visit. There is some point that the translator missed as a correct translation. He said on the first paragraph, you see, the page 54 starts with the remainder of a previous paragraph, and then there's a new one that starts with "it is essential." He said it is essential that there be no break and no transmission in the pursuit of learning, for this is indeed harmful. I don't like the word break, because the word break might mean like rest. I'm not saying it's totally wrong, but Imam Zarnuji has mentioned earlier, if you guys remember, the importance of rest. What he means now is what has been mentioned in the book by وَيَنْبَغِي أَلَّا يَكُونَ لِطَالِبِ الْعِلْمِ فَتْرَةٌ فَإِنَّهَا آفَةٌ. Fatra comes from futur, and it's not necessarily a break. You can have a healthy break, a positive break. But what's a break is, if you overload yourself and then all of a sudden there's a complete stoppage. This is what they're talking about, not resting and alternating hard work with rest. This is not what they're talking about. They're talking about when people overload themselves for so long and then they drop, like for a month, 2 weeks, before they're able to regain their strength once more. And this is because of cramming. Spaced repetition facilitates a healthy or positive break, because you're not overloading yourself physically. Alright? So just note that here break means fatra, or a complete stoppage, and he's not talking about break in the sense of resting. He's talking about the break meaning stopping completely. And what he mentioned throughout the chapter, he's trying to mention, is that always indulge yourself and keep yourself in the mindset of the thing that you're learning currently. The more you think about your specialization or something that you're currently studying, it's very similar to people who work. You might find them going out. They think they have their work in mind. But also don't confuse this with not taking rest at all. What he's trying to say, don't diffuse your concentration on different areas, and don't be indulged so much in resting or indulge in so much in learning. What he's saying, learn, have your focused attention time or your sustained attention periods, do rest, But generally speaking, develop a mindset to keep your learning endeavor in mind. Because see, you make sometimes lifestyle decisions that might negatively affect your learning. You understand? Like, let's go out tonight and watch a movie and finish whatever at 2 a.m. and tomorrow I have a lecture because I'm resting. That would hinder your efforts the next day. Or even, stay out at night or stay up late at night for too long, saying dhikr. 2 hours of dhikr and not getting enough sleep, and then the next day I cannot focus on a lecture. You can always adjust things moderately. Alright, and then what we want to finish this part is he talks about this idea. It is necessary in making a study of legal knowledge to memorize one particular law book constantly, so that after this it will be easier for one to retain whatever legal information one hears. I guess we talked about this, the importance for people who study law or Sharia to memorize things, because they always have to refer to the particular text itself. The wording here is absolutely important because it's a law. So this is important. So just put that in the context of law. And those who know something about the bar exam for the lawyers in America will understand how memorization is important. The idea, just to wrap up this chapter, this notion of there is a beginner, and a beginner needs small amounts, going to gradual, and there's spaced repetition. So now you should have been thinking about, okay, for how long? When do a beginner work himself out, go through this middle phase until being an expert in something? K. Anders Ericsson from Florida State University did a study on musicians and the sports professionals and experts, and he found that they received or they attained expert performance after 10,000 hours. Okay, 10,000 hours before you become an expert in something. If you think that's like almost 5 years of work, continuous work without any vacation or something.
So 5 years instead of beginner?
No, to develop a kind of an expert performance in something. All right. So when somebody comes and asks me, something, how can I be an expert in this or an expert in that? I tell them, 5 to 10 years. That's a lot. Okay. Take a 4 years bachelor degree, another 2 in masters, another 2 as a PhD, and then work yourself out as a teaching assistant for a couple of years before becoming a teacher in university. That's about 10 years. Unfortunately, we just don't put that in context. Put it in context. So, to become an expert in something without academia, you most likely need at least 5 good years of learning this and practicing. And this is the confusion that also, again, the Salafis do with learning. If you finish a book, you become a sheikh. And if you mention K. Anders Ericsson, they'll go, is this a Swedish guy? He's not a Muslim. He should not know. But unfortunately, if you apply spaced repetition in learning something, you would not gain that level unless you spend that amount of time. And even, I believe Imam Zuhriya said that al-ilm bil-ayyam wal-layali. It's through time. It's not something. It requires days and nights. It's not something that you get like that. You can learn about something. As this guy, Josh, I can't remember his Josh what, is how to learn something in 20 hours. You can learn something in 20 hours, but you cannot be an expert in 20 hours. I guarantee you can learn about something in 8 hours. I do that challenge. You can learn something in 8 hours. But learn about it. Like, have an idea. You can, in 8 hours of attention, you can have a background about learning how to learn. a background in economics, a background in philosophy, a background in engineering. You can know, the different areas of engineering, what is engineering all about, the current important, questions in engineering or new applications. You can know the most important books that engineers use to teach. You can all of this introductory material. You can get it in 8 hours, and you automatically move from zero to a beginner in 8 hours. I guarantee that. Not knowing anything to knowing something in 8 hours. Yes. Doing some beginner level practices in 20 hours. Yes, you can. But being an expert in something, that's a different issue. Because for you to be an expert, that entails what? That you create knowledge, you generate knowledge. And that would not happen unless knowledge, you develop the habit of that field. That field itself becomes part of your psyche, becomes part of your mind. Just how your mind generates ideas, your mind gets molded by, let's say, economics, for example. Just like how your mind, when it comes molded by ideas, or certain ideas, what happens? This happens with sins. A person who repeats a sin, what happens? His mind becomes molded with the sin. So ideas keep generating in his mind about that same sin. And new things he would come up with within this realm of this particular sin. So same thing, if you learn something, if you learn knowledge, education, and you develop this habit of it, your mind is molded with that area, with that expertise. So you'll find new ideas generating automatically. And this is what they call malaka. That knowledge comes out as a habit, bila rawiyya, meaning you don't need to do effort, to exert effort to develop, to get an idea in something, or to explore something. It's just like that with a mouse click. But before that mouse click moment, you need 10,000 hours at least of molding your mind with something, with an area of knowledge. You understand? All right, this is the philosophical explanation of it. All right, and we leave inshallah chapter 7 and 8 and perhaps 9 also for next time. We stop now at page 54 and the end of the book. The last page of chapter 13, that's on page 74. So alhamdulillah, today is the 5th session. We have 3 more sessions to go and only 20 pages to cover. So I guess we'll finish inshallah as we're planning in 8 sessions. Alright? Alhamdulillah. And this will be a great honor if we do this. Many lessons here in Egypt, whether here at Al-Madiyafa, before that, they have a new system now. They require, it's a prerequisite from the teacher to assign a certain amount of time, certain weeks, for him to finish a book or finish something, a course. But alhamdulillah, we'll finish on time if everything moves as scheduled. I'll just ask you to just pass this one for the guys and one for the girls for the attendance. All right, if you have any questions, we can go on until 9, and then we finish then. Yes, and before that, the girls required that we begin at 6:30, and they're becoming now the only the ones that don't come at 6:30. All right, just keep that in mind. Huh? Okay. Yes, your question.
Oh no, I was. Are you saying that learning is a habit? Like whatever we learn is just a habit.
Learning is a habit and happens through habits as well. They're complex. The human mind is complex. All right. You learn within the mechanisms of habits, and what you learn becomes a habit as well. What you learn are 2 things: the techniques you applied in learning and the content you learned using these techniques. So after you finish learning, you have developed 2 new habits: the habit of the content itself and the habit of the techniques used to attain that content. You get my point?
Yeah.
And all that is facilitated through the mechanisms of how humans learn habits or attain habits as well.
So we all learn through habits.
Of course, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Viewers to television, they're learners. They just sit there and receive information. And anchors and television programs, they do space repetition, they do all different kinds of things. They do multi-sensory perceptions, showing graphics and sometimes numbers and sometimes audio and all these different things. And they use words that are simple to explain for beginners, and they use analogies and metaphors. So the TV viewers, they're just sitting there, receiving, they're learning, but not necessarily learning what they need to learn. You're welcome. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yes, you.
Yes. I have a small comment about
Sure.
the talk, the first 20 hours of Josh Kaufman.
Yes.
He said that 20 hours just to be and to know how to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
To become an expert.
Exactly.
That's a little misconception, I guess. People,
Exactly. This is what I want. This is what I meant to note. Yes.
Yes, it's a very good book. Everyone should read it.
Yeah, and it's translated into Arabic too. I got the Arabic translation yesterday.
Okay. And I have a small
Sure.
question. You
Yes.
said that we shouldn't mix religion with culture.
Uh-huh.
But this is contradict our understand to religion because I believe that Allah said قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. So can you elaborate this point more?
Yes, what I mean is that they're related, but they're not the exact same things. All right. I'm not saying that religion has nothing to do with culture, but I'm saying a person can be a Muslim and has a culture of a different country that he or she is living in. And what you have mentioned is not necessarily culture. What you mentioned in the ayah is more of intentions and things that you do. Right? قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ. Right? Regardless of what they are.
So it's include everything.
Yes, regardless of what they are. You get my point. Whether I wear blue or red, or put aside red. Whether, because of the difference in opinions in that particular area. But whether I wear blue or, dark brown or orange or yellow, is it lillah or not? This is the religious part. But I am from Nigeria. I wear orange. And somebody else from Sudan, they wear green. And you're from Egypt, you wear white, for example. I don't know, I'm just saying. And the person from the US, they wear blue. Let's say this is the color of their, the traditional dress. Then, regardless of which color you pick, culture, as long as you do it lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't contradict the law, the Islamic law. And this is why, distinguish between culture that has different factors other than religion in them. Part of it, so the skin color plays a role in culture. Economic levels play a role in culture. The types of food available plays a role in culture. The type of weather plays a role in culture. But eventually, do you do those things in your culture because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you do them because of something else? This is the religious part. And what I mean, don't mix both of them, because if you turn these cultural issues, what to wear, which color, into, if you change those things from culture to religion, it becomes an ideology. For example, you know what I mean? Like, for example, this Salafi Sheikh, I remember, listening to him many years ago. And he used to give lessons in Mbebe. And he found some girls or ladies attending his lesson wearing blue navy niqabs and brown or maroon red niqabs. He said, I saw women today wearing blue and maroon red. This is play in God's religion. You guys are playing. When you say that to women in 1980s in Egypt, because they're wearing niqab and it's blue, not black, you're turning culture into ideology. Not because of the women of Al-Ansar. He uses this narration in Sahih Bukhari that women from Ansar, when they heard the verse of the hijab, they covered their faces and they looked like it's like their heads were like the crows, and because they were dressed in black. The verse doesn't mention black. They were wearing black out of their culture. You understand? There was no verse that said, please wear black, or you must wear black. They were wearing black as of the normal life in Bedouin Arabia back then. You understand? So the verse came to them, cover your heads. So they covered their heads. Oh, they covered their heads with black because they were wearing black. You get my point. So he now necessitated from every single woman to wear the same color that Bedouin Sahabiyat, or the female companions used to wear back then. Then you're turning culture into to religion. That would form ideology. That's not religion. Religion should encompass people regardless of their diverse differences in what they eat, or what colors they like to wear, or what language they speak. But if you make only one thing that is acceptable, it's like having a cult or an ideology like, communism, for example. And this is what, and then when religion plus culture becomes an ideology, you find people are not fair and not just and have biases and stereotypes. So if I see somebody wearing a different color, I start looking at them. Why are you wearing a different color? And you would find somebody, like if they see here in Egypt or something, somebody wearing a galabiya that is black. Is he Shi'i? Just a black galabiya. You understand? You start developing these hostilities of diversity, and yet religion is for everybody. Yes, religion has a language, and this is distinct about Islam. It has the Arabic language. Because the miracle of the religion came through Arabic. So Arabic has to be part of the religion because of that intricate matter. Otherwise, Islam does not... the Prophet ﷺ, some certain foods he did not like, even though the companions used to eat, and he did not say anything. He used not to eat al-bab, for example. He left the companions, whoever wants to eat it will eat it. Right? And he mentioned that we can eat, grasshoppers. Now we cannot. If you go to an Egyptian, you say, do you eat grasshoppers? If you don't eat grasshoppers, why not? It's mentioned in the Sunnah. Why you're not eating grasshoppers? You should not do that. Yeah, this is what I'm critiquing. I'm not talking that a Muslim should not have an identity or a sense of religious identity. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about those people who turn minute differences part of life, that human beings are diverse. If I require from a person who has a dark skin color to wear dark clothes near the equator, then I'm asking them to burn their skin, because the weather is the sun. The dark clothes would absorb the heat, right? So they usually wear colorful, clothing that is, would reflect the sun. At the same time, it gives them the sense of culture. So when they come here, they stand out. You find a Nigerian or a person from Ghana or anywhere, they would stand out. This is what I call culture. The color of his dress. This is not Islam. This is his Nigerian part. You understand? Koshari is our Egyptian part. This is not Islam. This is what I mean by culture. But do you eat koshari for what? You understand that? Do you eat fatta because of what? You get my point. Yes, I eat fatta. I slaughter the sheep and I eat the meat and I say Bismillah. This is the religion part. I'm following the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not eating pigs, for example. I'm eating the meat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed me to eat. And I'm cooking it and I'm saying Bismillah and I'm making sure that when I slaughter the sheep, I slaughter it according to the Islamic manners, and the other sheep should not see it, and all of these, rules that Islam mandates upon a Muslim. But then how should I cook the meat? That would differ then, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but that would differ from Egypt to Saudi Arabia. We would eat fatta, they would eat kapsa, It's just part of life. Yes. Now we're all hungry. Yeah. Anything would satisfy our hunger now. I know.
One fish and one stew.
Yeah.
Come on.
You said that the teacher teaching beginners should use basics for tiny steps.
Definitely.
So if I'm not a teacher, I'm just an instructor who instruct a group of students for just one lecture.
Okay.
And I want to cover a science or a field of study. Shall I just use the basics, or tell them the basics and then provide them with resources to deepen, or what to do?
Well, it depends upon the goal of the lecture. That why are you doing the lecture? If you're doing a lecture to inform people, then that would require from you a certain language and a certain level. If you're doing the lecture to for awareness, is a different issue. If you're introducing a topic, that's a third reason. If you're answering questions, that's a fourth reason. So it depends why are you doing this. And it depends also on the diversity of the group. Are they all the same level, or do you have different levels, and so forth. And also, how are you presenting yourself, and how they perceive you is also, or how you would want them to perceive you. See, knowledge has to be communicated to the public, all right? But at the same time, knowledge has to be, the grade or the high grade of knowledge has to be respected. People, as an instructor or as a teacher, you must, whatever tools you'll be using, but you must make sure that people can differentiate between science, popular science, and pseudoscience, regardless of what you do, regardless of how you facilitate things. But it's very important for them to see both. Not only if you're doing popular science, for example, which is communicating the science of academia to people. This is important, but at the same time, connect them to academia. It's important for people to see that science is something of a high regard, that not anybody can attain. Because if you don't do that, everybody will be talking about things. Like what happened with self-development here in Egypt. تنمية بشرية. You understand? This is what happened to it. That everybody started saying anything about anything and about everything. You get my point? So, yes?
What if this is just academic, not related to the membership? Just academic?
Well, again, see, then my very first points would come back. Are they from the same grade level or not? Perhaps they all, or most of them come from a certain grade level. Then this would kind of, to a great extent, determine what you're giving them and the language that you're using to give them, and also the goal of the topic. I guess these would be the most important things. Their grade level and what are you trying to come up with. I can give a lesson to a small group, not a huge crowd, but to a small group, just to show them, like, don't hurry up. Just make things difficult for them because you're trying to send a message. And you would tell them at the end, I'm doing this, so now you understand. Things can be difficult. So it depends. What is your reason? What are you trying to communicate as a person? Why is this event is being held? And their level is definitely is a very important factor. Somebody raised, yes.
Actually, I have 3 questions.
Okay.
Okay, the first thing, the model that you have mentioned about people who live in the dorm and they start their day in Fajr to study and sleep at Isha. Actually, this model, they're just living for studying, and you describe them as they're taking study as too much serious. In our age or in the way that we are living right now, especially in universities, we are not people who just study. We consider them as they're losers,
Geeks
yeah,
and nerds, yes. Okay.
not only nerds and geeks, no, as they do not have anything else.
Okay.
Is this even correct as people who maybe work part-time? I'm not talking about the people who are forced to do so. This is something that is choosable, as if I want to work, or the idea of the student activities, thousands of student activities everywhere. Is this, you're not taking your study too much serious?
Okay.
This is the first thing.
Okay.
The second one, how can I differentiate between my academia system or process if what I'm getting from my college is information or it's knowledge? Should I depend on my memory, as if I remembered it, that means it's knowledge, or if I totally understand it, that means it's knowledge, or it depends on what to classify it as it's knowledge, not information. And we just care about the year it's gonna pass, and maybe we didn't remember actually what we got in the last year.
Okay.
The third one, about the strong of a narration and the weakness of a narration.
Okay.
It's something actually is annoying me so much. As how can we classify this? And why we should trust those people? As there's someone is called Islam al-Bahiri. He's actually is annoying me, not because of anything that he's saying, just about the idea, criticizing these people, just talking about this point. We trust what is in Quran and what is in narrations. Like he's creating thoughts about them. I'm annoyed because maybe I'm just against the idea, as I hate the idea that someone is talking about the narrations and how people describe it or explain it. Or maybe I'm not trying to work my mind and I just believe in that, so I'm gonna take it like that because the messenger just say it or what. This is my 3 questions.
Okay, very well. Any other questions before these 3? Because most likely they will take the time for until then. Yes, Mustafa.
First of all, my apologies for you and for all my classmates for coming late.
Sorry.
I read something in chapter 6, the beginning. It says, I don't know if you already covered this or not, but it says that if you want to begin your studying, you should start on Wednesdays.
Yes.
You covered it?
Yeah, we did, but
Okay.
no problem.
I
It's okay.
just wanted to know why.
Okay. It's very much related to her third question a little bit. Okay. The first question about those who spend enormous times in hours in dorms and learning and not having a social life or anything of that sort, and how people now in our modern day culture call them losers. Well, would we call people who work at multinational corporations from the morning until at night and they don't see their children except for 2 hours while they're sleeping and then they wake up early the next day, are they losers as well?
I'm talking about.
I'm not saying. I know. I'm just putting that in the context of lifestyle. I mean, do we call them losers? Do we call those people who work long hours per day to get money? Are they losers? See, again, it's different priorities for people. I'm not saying also that this is the only way for you to learn something. Okay, this is one of the ways you can learn things. See, certain professions require that kind of training. I mean, take the military, for example. I mean, do people who go to a military academy anywhere around the world, I mean, do they get social breaks every weekend? Not necessarily, right? Because it requires from them a certain kind of discipline in their lives. So, I mean, those scholars in India, they think that a scholar requires some kind of a discipline. For him to carry out a disciplined life, to be a role model, then he should be disciplined in that way. I'm not saying this is the only right form, but this is a form of the things that are being applied. So I'm not saying that one way is right and the other way is wrong. I'm just saying that in certain contexts, certain professions would require that amount of time. We should not call them geeks or nerds, but this is how they perceive knowledge facilitation. And perhaps their view or their approach of their field is discipline. Okay? But do you have to be like this in everything that you learn? Not necessarily. But the core idea, you need hours to become an expert in something. Whether you spend the hours completely disciplined that like they would do, or you do the hours as, alternate focused attention and sustained attention with breaks and weekends and the holidays and going out during the day to have some sort of a social refreshment and then coming back, that's another issue. But the whole point is to have a sustained competence, and that would come through spaced repetition and the tools that we have mentioned. But what I was talking about a model that provides discipline in education. All right, and how these models are similar to what happens in the West as well. But because of this is religious and these study, secular fields, we feel that they're two distinct areas, but two completely different. But they're using the same mechanisms. Oh, you get my point here, or?
Kind of no. As
Okay.
what I mean, who is more successful? The people who just take their study or their academia too much serious, and those are the successful people, or people who just do a lot of things beside their study, as they gain their academia experience and their social experience. And as you're not gonna get everything from your college or your university.
Well, then it would depend upon your discipline. It would depend about the kind of education you're getting from the university. It will get on the profession and the profession that or the specialization that you're trying to study. But in all cases, you would need some kind of a lifestyle that promotes learning. It's not that I'm just trying to get the 4 years passed by. But then what you say too much serious, I would call it discipline. I wouldn't call a person trying to become an army man, trying to become an army officer. I would not say that he's too much serious. I would say he's disciplined. All right? Or requires a certain level of discipline that is not required from me. All right? As an engineer or an economist or a physicist or a chemist or whatever. Or a business entrepreneur. But at the same time, in all cases, you would need some kind of a learning mindset to be sustained throughout the 4 years if you're trying to get the fruit or the knowledge out of it. Yes? Okay, the second question about how to determine the difference between knowledge and information that we get in college. And the idea about memories and so forth. Well, see, answering these questions in the context of Egyptian learning or Egyptian educational systems is very difficult. But what I can say as an answer to this question in general, if memory is if you memorizing to facilitate comprehension, this is one. So knowledge has to be retained. Like when you learn something, you have to remember it. If you don't remember, then you're not learning. All right. So this is to begin with, whether information or knowledge. So this is something that is in information and in knowledge. It has to be retained over a period of time. Then this knowledge must have two things. For this information to become knowledge must have two things. Some kind of a practice, deliberate practice of this knowledge in different contexts, of this information in different contexts. And the other point is to work the relationships and the connections between these informations. When you understand connections, and you apply different information in various contexts over a period of time, this develops knowledge, not only information. Information, if you memorize, not understand. Information, if you learn in a list, not in a network form, without drawing connections between things. Regardless, Egyptian educational systems or whatever. All right. Now the idea of stronger versus weak narrations. Just a quick answer. They would rather use a weak narration than to decide or to do an arbitrary decision on which day they study or they began their endeavors. And it gives them a sense of a tradition also. And we can talk about it later as well. All right. See, people who criticize the narratives of Sahih Bukhari, I have one question for them. And if they can answer this question professionally and academically, then they have something to say. I'm not saying they're correct. Note. Then they have something to say. What is that question? When they come, sometimes, and they want to talk about how a certain narration is weak. I know most of their talks is that they attack the text itself. You understand? Like they would say, this text is not correct. Why? Because our minds say that this is so weird, this is absurd. How come the Prophet ﷺ have said this? Then the narration, the chain of narrators, they must be wrong about narrating this hadith. All right? But then they come at some points, and Islam Bukhari did this, where he would say that this narrative is weak. How come are you guys accepting his narration? I have a question for Islam Bukhari. How did you know that he's weak? Because it's the same mechanism that they transferred or they narrated the hadith. You understand? If you doubt Sahih al-Bukhari, right, eventually you would have, and he actually is saying that now, that you have to doubt everything in the Muslim tradition. And Imam Abu Bakr al-Razi, he said that in his response to Galenus, the Greek physician that we talked about last time, if you guys remember, he wrote a book called Ash-Shukuk ala Kitabi Jalinus, or the doubts on the book of Galenus. And when Abu Bakr al-Razi is a physician, and he said that the philosophical tradition entails two things. You have to respect those who provided knowledge before you in the same field, but at the same time, you can question what they say. What Islam al-Bihari is doing, he is saying, we don't need them at all. We have to begin from scratch. And there hasn't been one area of knowledge in the history of mankind and existing today succeeding unless people who come after the founding fathers, they add and not destroy. Alright? Without the cosmological view of Copernicus, Newton would not have proposed something different. Alright? And so forth. And without Newton, Einstein would not have proposed something different. And each one takes from the person before. I know that science is built upon trial and error and experimentations and data and measuring tools and so forth. But the same mechanism is there. That the person that comes after uses the knowledge generated by the one before to develop new knowledge. Alright? Islam al-Bihari, you would find him, not finishing the verses when he reads them, if he reads them correctly. Not saying the hadith correctly, even if he, mentions the full hadith. Not putting things in context. And then when you start saying that this hadith is not correct because the narratives, are weak, and you, as scholars of hadith yourselves, you guys have said that he's a weak narrator. Why do you believe us? You have said that all scholars of hadith, they're just full scandals and they're fraud, right? So why do you believe them when they say that a certain narrator is false? And you know what? If you don't trust them, then your prayer is false. Because the Quran does not explain how we should pray. And if you accept the words and how we pray, then you have to accept in everything else. Unless you develop a field of knowledge that can measure when to accept the words of al-muhaddithin, the scholars of hadith, and when not to. But until you do that, you should not be talking.
You're depending on logic.
No, he's not depending on logic, he's depending on personal preferences. Because they depend on logic, and they said that Imam al-Shirbini is talking about eating humans, and he was not, as I mentioned before. That's not logic, that's personal preferences, that's being ignorant. If I challenge that he studied logic. He doesn't even know the difference between a correct analogy and logical fallacies. He does not know, when to, for example, and I didn't want to get into, all these things. But if we take an example, when he talks about the Muslim jurists, and then he starts saying, because you say he depends on logic, and he starts saying, for example, al-Bashawat, the pashas, right? And he says that, right? He is committing a logical fallacy. Because in Egypt, when we say something like this, oh, the pashas, what are we doing? We're downgrading the people, right? So what he is trying to do to the listeners, what he's trying to do is what? He's trying to let them appear as they know nothing, right? But he's not presenting anything either. He said that he studied in Wales, right? And I told you guys, in Harvard University, they talk about this case of the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens. If he's using logic, he should have gotten this law case study that is being presented in Harvard classes about a case of cannibalism and how the scholars nowadays are using it to teach and to facilitate learning. But he's not doing that. He doesn't understand how tradition is built. What he's doing, he's just reading with an anticipation to make them look false and say mistakes. Again, if you don't accept, if Islam doesn't accept how we pray, then he must tell us, if he doesn't accept the hadith or the narrations, he should tell us how we pray. Why are we praying in such form? He would say, he might respond and say, well, we are doing this because of tawatur. Meaning, a big or a large number of people are doing one thing, and then another large number of people are doing another thing, the same thing over and over again over generations. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Are you following?
Yeah.
That prayer is not taken from Sahih Bukhari, and it's not taken from the Quran, it's taken from each generation passing it to another. And then I would have to ask him, are you sure that this is why prayer is correct? Because if he says yes, I'll tell him the same thing happened to the tradition. One generation to another, these books have been passing down. How did they reach you, man? They reached you the same way prayer has reached you. So what's the difference between you and anybody else saying that prayers are not a must? People know Sahih al-Bukhari, the printed Sahih al-Bukhari, as much as they know that Asr prayer is 4 prayers. So if you say Asr prayer, we took it generation by generation, and this is why it's correct, then Sahih Bukhari was taken generation by generation, this is why it's correct. Duh, use logic. But he's not. He did not even, doesn't even have debate skills. But he has mass media training. This is what he has. Develop, use NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, make things appear correct. And he might be even believing himself. But he has to tell me, why is he praying Maghrib 3 rak'ahs? Why? How did you know? Did your father tell you? Well, he might be wrong. The society, we might all be wrong, right? The truth could be somewhere else. Maybe somebody tricked us. Maybe. Prove it. Where is your proof? Bring it out. You don't have a proof. Without them. That's it. You can tell me now, look, the way we present Islamic tradition to students is making them go into violence. I can tell you, yes, you're right. We have to put things in context. We cannot apply politics of 800 years ago to politics today. You are right. We have to put it in a way that facilitates modern day understanding. I grant you that much. Yes?
But if I want to discuss a small issue, maybe about music and not songs. They said there is a narration is saying that music is haram. But if we just think about Allah created birds singing, and there is a sound for the sea, a sound for...
Then listen to birds. Go ahead.
Yeah, so music is not haram. Maybe songs.
You got my logic mode started, I'm sorry.
So
What is
there
Magawi?
a hadith.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So there is a hadith saying that music is haram. So is it haram or not?
Alright, look, I'm not a mufti. I cannot answer this question. Even if I know the answer. But then, I cannot answer this question from this chair.
Yeah.
You understand? If I do this, then I'm trespassing my realm of expertise. But I want you just to note something. I'll tell you something that has nothing to do with fiqh. Right? Because, again, I'm not a mufti. Because if I say it's haram or it's halal, and then you do it because I said it, you have to do it because of a mufti has said it. Not because of somebody who knew information, not knowledge.
Yeah.
And my understanding in this area is information, not knowledge. This is practical learning how to learn. Alright? But I'll tell you something. Al-Farabi was a philosopher. Alright? he wrote a book called كتاب الموسيقى الكبير, right? The big book of music. And Nasir Shamma, for those who know Nasir Shamma, the oud, player, he got the manuscript that was written by Al-Farabi. And he developed the oud that was described by Al-Farabi, and I think it has 8 chords or something, like it has an additional chord that was not there in the available ouds. In that book, as far as I remember, Imam al-Farabi talks about how different mixtures of rhythms develop in the psyche of a person, different moods. And that's why Plato, for example, or Aristotle, I can't remember, most likely Plato, asked people of Athens not to listen to music. Because musicians can change moods and can control how you feel. That's Plato. That's not fiqh. That's Plato. My problem with these issues, that when I tell somebody Plato, they think, oh, okay, that's fine. But if I tell them like Ash-Shafi'i, that Shafi'iyas has said that don't listen to music, then they become hostile. And this part of the problem that we're at, and this is part of the problem that why somebody like Islam Bahir is saying these things, that those who study fiqh are not able to relate the law that they're studying with the life that they're living. This is their responsibility. This is not Islam Bahir's responsibility, not your responsibility, not my responsibility. This is the responsibility of fuqaha nowadays, not mine. And somebody like Islam al-Bahiri, if he's saying things that getting people deviated, a huge responsibility on people who speak about fiqh nowadays and about Islamic sciences. They are the ones responsible to answer him, not Ahmed al-Azhari of learning how to learn. This is not my role. This is the role of the muhaddithin. They're the fuqaha. They're the ones who should be answering him, not me. So again, Al-Farabi was talking about how different rhythms create different feelings, and there's a narration that has been mentioned in some of the books, like for example, Muftah al-Sa'ada by Tash Kubri Zada, and in that book, he's an Ottoman scholar, and he talks about the introductions to the different fields of knowledge, and he assigned a chapter on the science of music. And then he started mentioning the different, things that Muslims have wrote in music. By the way, Tashqudi Zada, talking about music, he himself, as a Hanafi, believed that music is haram. After he explained the different people that, did certain achievements in music, and he said, we don't listen to this. But he explained it. Anyways, he explained the story narrated a story by Al-Farabi. He entered a certain majlis, attended a certain event in front of a prince or a king, a Muslim prince. And he had this kind of something similar to oud. So what he did, he started playing with it, and he got everybody laughing because of the rhythms that they heard. So he played it again, and he got everybody crying. And then he played again, and he got them sleeping, and then he left out. You might say, is that true or not? But if you relate, if you take that metaphor, or that.
But it doesn't cause any problem.
Well, I don't have enough knowledge to say if it does or not. To be honest, again, I'm not saying it's haram or halal. It might be halal in some views, and it might be haram in different views. And maybe some of it is haram and some of it is halal. Like for example, Shafi'is have talked about how music is halal, but the music that has chords is not halal, and other types of music is halal, and so forth. Again, whether is it halal or not, can you determine if you listen to a song, would it develop as some kind of a pessimistic spirit in you or not? Is that halal or haram? Put aside the chords, put aside the music. Let's say that you're listening to a song, that the music of this song and the words of this song.
The problem is about the words itself.
No, the words and the music itself. Because I mean, some kind of music can make you feel down. It has, you know, sorrow, and it's very mellow, and it can get you in a mood of, you know, feeling that there's, you know, of sadness. Let's say this person is suffering from depression, and every time he would listen to this music piece, he would feel down. What is required from him?
It depends on the choice. You choose to listen or not.
But I'm not, just one second, I'm not discussing whether it depends on, I don't have enough knowledge. I'm just giving you a case. Just one second, guys. I'm just giving you a case, alright? What happens here is that a person is affected negatively by music. Do you grant this? That could happen.
But it's like everything in our lives.
Just one second. Do you grant this could happen?
Yeah, it can happen.
Okay. Everything in our life, did he choose to do this, or did it happen to him? Like, did somebody tie him to a chair and played it, or did he do it himself?
Do it himself.
Okay, so it's not like everything in our lives. Some things we don't choose, but this one he chose. Alright, so he chose voluntarily and deliberately to listen to something that would make him down. Right? If we, out of this, you grant that music is by choice, and you grant that music can change emotions. Right? So I can sometimes choose something that creates an emotion, and this emotion can be positive or negative. Okay. Do certain people, or do all of people, can tell which is a good emotion and which is a bad emotion?
No, it's according to their emotion.
What I mean is, sometimes you get a certain vibe, a certain spirit, a certain feeling. You don't know if it's correct or not. Sometimes you cannot even describe it in words. Right? Sometimes certain songs create certain triggers. All I'm saying is, did you consider all of these points before determining whether it's good or not? That's what I'm saying. Just put that in context. Regardless, is it you or the scholars who talk about it? Now we have more knowledge, experimental knowledge about music. So perhaps you should go back, revisit the texts that talk about music is permissible or not, and revisit the causes and effects on emotions and how and the interplay of music in that area, and then come up with a, you know, religious verdict, a religious fatwa. Unless we do this and then they do that, then we're not basing our judgment on sound knowledge. That's my view on that.
Okay,
Tell me.
I just want to say another comment.
Yes.
But there are some birds have a very sad voice.
Some birds have,
Sad voice.
they do sad sounds.
Yeah.
Then don't listen to them.
Okay, I knew this, but not sad, not bad voice as it's something is not as bad. No, I mean sad.
I never heard some bird.
No, there is someone. I don't know actually.
Very
which
well,
word.
but look. I'm not saying that the music is bad because it's sad. I'm saying I just wanted to mention you an example to say what that knowledge can have. That music. See, this is how to be very into what you do. Okay, that music affects so much your mindset, your mood, your mentality. And if it has that much strong or huge implication on yourself, then you should look into that before, jumping to a conclusion. That's all what I meant.
Yeah.
It could be positive, but in the wrong direction too. Who knows? And out of that, as well, is another point also that we don't talk about in music. That the whole idea of taste. Also, that's another issue. But the Prophet ﷺ, when they entered, when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, because see, most people, because if you want to connect this to Sahih Bukhari, because the hadith in Sahih Bukhari that the Prophet ﷺ says, سيأتي على الناس زمان يستحلون فيه الحرى والحرير والخمر والمعازف. There will be a time where people start dealing with adultery and wearing silk and drinking and listening to music as something permissible. يستحلون, making something that is wrong or impermissible, making it as if it's permissible. And they deducted out of this that is haram. And those who argue that listening to music is permissible, they might mention a hadith where Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, also narrated in the Bukhari and Muslim, as if I can recall correctly, that when he entered the house of the Prophet ﷺ and he found these two girls, chanting and playing music on a day of Eid, and he said, "Abu Muzmur al-Shaytan fi bayti Rasulillah," meaning the trumpet of the devil in the house of the Prophet. And he was wondering, how is that? He said, let them, يا أبا بكر دعهما يا أبا بكر فإن لكل قوم إن اليوم يوم عيد وإن لكل قوم عيد. Today's a holiday, leave them playing. Look, see, if you're talking, I'm not saying you, but those who talk about music is permissible, well, definitely music of Lebanese singers, female Lebanese singers, is not permissible whatsoever. This is not music. But if you want to do music, to me, if we're talking Nasir Shamma, that's music, for example. You get my point. Tamer Hosni is not music. I'm mentioning him because he's the guy. So
I'm talking about the instrument.
I understand. But again, because that's why I said in the beginning, I'm not talking to you. Alright. Because I understand that some people, they take this view that, okay, music is halal. Okay. But those who said it's halal, they were talking about Nasir Shamma, for example. They were talking about Hamza Namira, for example.
Yeah.
But they were not talking about Haifa Wahbi. You get my point. They were not talking about that. That was not even addressed. This is not. This issue is not a matter of debate for them. You get my point. So they were already discussing something like that. We find it as moderate. But now the question is, does it have positive implications or not? Hamza Namira's recent songs, some of them, to me, I feel they're very pessimistic. If you listen to them, you start having problems with destiny and fate, and you feel that everything is bad. I don't like that. Alright? Other songs, you might find them good, as in lyrics or music. So the point is, when they debated this, and when they mentioned the hadith, and then they were going overboard with time, when they mentioned hadith of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, they did not note something that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq has said in the house of the Prophet, and he had the courage to say, Abu Muzmur al-Shaytan. How can the first companion out of all companions attribute something in the house of the Prophet to the devil without prior knowledge? How would he do that? And that the Prophet ﷺ did not critique his judgment. He only did some kind of an excuse for that particular event. This is, one way they work it out. Again, I'm not saying this is the only view, but I'm just showing you how trying to extract a ruling out of these hadith can go back and forth in a very difficult matter to deal with. All in all, we can read the Farabi's book, which is like 2 volumes, and see what he says about the effect of music on emotions, for example. Again, I'm not saying which is haram, I'm not saying it's halal. I personally cannot declare from this place, to talk about what is halal, what's haram. And if you know something, when I talk about Islam Bihani, I wasn't talking about individual things he has said, for the exception of this idea of the course justice and this matter. Otherwise, I talk to him about methodology, which is something I believe I'm an expert in. So I talk about methodology. How does he approach matters of sciences and discourse? How does he evaluate facts? How does he discern concepts and which ones to accept and which ones we would not, and so on. That's all. Okay, you're most welcome. Alright, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Thank you, appreciate it. Guys, I need your attendance.